What's up, friends? This video is going to be exceptionally valuable for your progress, so I want you to do two specific things. Really pay attention, and above all, enjoy this lesson because it's going to help you significantly enhance your overall chess skills. We're going to take a detailed look at a legendary game played by Garry Kasparov with the black pieces. His opponent, PK. The most important thing to keep in mind about this lesson is that we're going to deeply understand and master how to play one of the best defenses with the black pieces. We're talking about the King's Indian defense. I absolutely love playing this defense, and when you finish watching this video, I promise it will become one of your favorites too. Personally, I think it's becoming my favorite way to face the classic Queen's Pawn opening systems. I'm going to break down the core ideas, exactly how you should face them, and everything you need to know to play a game using this opening. In this position, white plays knight to f3. The good thing about this defense is that really, white can play whatever they want, and we're pretty much always going to respond in exactly the same way. We'll start by fianchettoing our light square bishop. This is our primary strategic plan, okay? Normally, when the player with the white pieces starts with the queen's pawn, they also tend to use the queen's bishop pawn to place it right next to it. That is, the moves d4 and c4. So it's almost always a good idea to place this bishop in the fianchetto, which goes from the h8 square to the a1 square because the d4 pawn is, in quotes, weak. Let me explain. The c pawn, having advanced, is no longer defending this d4 pawn, and now it can only be defended by the d pawn. And let me tell you something else in advance. Normally, in the King's Indian defense, the most dangerous thing for black is if white also pushes this pawn to e4, so that the d4 pawn will always be a weakness. In this case, the game continued as follows. Knight to c3, white is playing perfectly well, and black castles. At this point, we have already successfully accomplished our first task, fianchettoing our bishop and completing the process of castling short. You'll need to do this in every game. See how it's pretty simple? Actually, you can also use this plan with the white pieces. Instead of being called the King's Indian defense, it would be called the King's Indian attack. Something you really need to keep in mind, and it's extremely important that you remember this, is that when they play the move e4, which they should because we're letting them, we're giving our opponent the whole center to take with their pawns. We absolutely must play the move d6. Most of y'all already know this, but it's extremely important. If we don't do this, they're going to play e5 and push our knight away, and it will always end up badly placed. In this case, by playing d6, advancing to e5 wouldn't be a good idea anymore because then all we would have to do is make the exchanges. I'll show you here. Pawn takes pawn, and then we could exchange queens. If they don't want to lose castling rights, they should capture with the knight. And as you can see, this position is much better for black than for white. Let's play, for example, knight to g4. We're threatening this pawn with two pieces. We're better developed, this bishop is about to come out, we're already castled, and our opponent is going to have a really tough time. If instead of capturing with the knight, they capture with the king, this move is even stronger because it attacks the fork. You can see it here on this f2 square. And of course, it also attacks this point, which we're definitely going to recover. So we come to a conclusion. Let's put things back the way they were. When white plays this e4 right here, we absolutely have to play d6. And we're not afraid now if they push to e5, because after the exchanges, we trade queens and end up in a better middle game or end game. This is extremely important. You should always think a little bit long term, not just about what will happen in the next few moves, but about how you'll end up in the position. As I always tell you, in chess, there are three phases of the game: the opening, the middle game, and the end game. And we need to control all three and think about how they connect so we don't end up lost later on, okay? Very good. In this game, for example, the most mainline variation of all was played. And this is what I love about studying these kinds of games. Obviously, the opponent with the white pieces has a 2600 ELO rating and defends incredibly well. But the reality of the situation is we typically find ourselves playing against opponents who are significantly less experienced than this kind of player. So, you know what? They won't defend as well. It'll actually be even easier for us to win the game. Here, we've already got everything set up. We have already finished our, let's say, very first piece setup. And this is where a lot of people get lost. Don't worry, let's just take a moment to carefully consider your options when you reach this position. Do the white pieces want to castle short or long? I can already see that they want to castle short, right? If they had developed this bishop and this queen to castle long, then it would be very clear. If they castle short, we want to push the e5 pawn. If they castle long, we want to push the c5 pawn. And this is really important. I'm going to give you a little trick. Pay attention to this. Pawn chains, okay? This, for example, would be a pawn chain. Do you see that? They give us clues about where our attack should go. We want to attack the king because in the king's Indian, we want to checkmate our opponent. That's right, checkmate. If we have to sacrifice a piece along the way, we're going to do it because our goal isn't just to get a slightly better endgame. No, it's to checkmate, okay? So if they're going to castle short, which is what we're seeing in this game, they're going to castle short, we're going to push this e5 so that our pawn chain points toward the king. If they were to castle long, our pawn chain would also be pointing toward the king. This is much more important than you think, and you'll see next that it's going to be exactly as I'm telling you. All right, question number one. Chess teacher, aren't you just giving away the d5 pawn here? Shouldn't we play a move like knight to d7 or knight to c6 first to defend the d5 square? No, that would be a slight inaccuracy. Let's put it that way. If we play knight to c6, it's true that we put good pressure on d4, but they could immediately play this pawn here, and it would bother our knight. If we play knight to d7, really, we're a bit passive and we're not threatening anything yet. Even though it's a good move, we actually prefer to develop this knight via c6 so that later we can bring it to e7. This move order will work really well for you in your games. So remember one thing, whenever you can, try to play the knight through c6. So let's see, chess teacher, tell me why you're not just giving away the pawn here. Why are you doing it right away? All right, here, if white decides to capture this pawn after the exchanges, obviously they should first trade queens, because if not, it would be exactly the same but worse, since we would be the ones to trade and push one of their pieces back. So they have to trade queens. And now all we have to do is simply wait to see if they take the pawn or not. If they've gone into this line, obviously they're going to take the pawn we just, in quotes, gave away. Because if you look closely, unless they're in a really bad spot, they've given us the whole file. This bishop is going to come out, and this position is much better for black. So what happens if they take this pawn? Well, the good thing about having this bishop in fianchetto is that we can always jump in with this knight to get it back. So a move like knight takes e4 would already be recovering the pawn. If they capture our knight, we'll capture theirs. And if they retreat, the knight, we could, for example, play knight takes knight. We would double these pawns, and thinking again about an endgame, we would be in a strategically won endgame because our opponent, let's put it like this, for example, would have these two pawns that are super easy to attack because they're isolated and doubled, and we would simply have two pawn islands that are really well placed and without any kind of problem. Therefore, already thinking about a possible endgame, we would enter a one endgame. Look how interesting what we're talking about is, right? Let's put these pieces back where they were. This one was over here, and this knight had developed over here. Pesci. So we can play e5 right away. They can't take it from us. In this case, what they did was castle, the most common move of all. Kasparov really understood the king's Indian here, honestly. He was a true genius, and he played the move knight to c6. If you've been paying attention to my explanations, you'll understand this move. Chess teacher, isn't this move a bit strange? They played d5 and kicked this knight out. That's exactly what we want. Here we have two options. Either take here, okay, and play this kind of position where now our goal will be to place the rook on the file and play an open position. Or what I personally like the most, without a doubt, is to play knight to c6. precisely to force this kind of advance, because not advancing would be very dangerous for white, since this point would be heavily attacked, and also indirectly by this bishop. Do you remember how dangerous it was? And where knight takes e4 would definitely be very dangerous. So they have to advance. And this is the most thrilling thing about the king's Indian defense. They close us in, and we want to bring our knight to e7. You remember this? Knight to c6, knight to e7. Super important. Now, we are heading right into what looks like a very spectacularly exciting middle game. It's also extremely important to properly evaluate the middle game plans. By the way, before I forget, oh, you all are thanking me for the academy. You're welcome, friends. Honestly, we created the academy with a lot of excitement so you can really improve at chess, so you can get better at openings, middle game, end games, calculation, and strategy. Anyone who joins the academy is guaranteed to improve. I'll leave the link for it down below in the description. When you finish the video, go check it out if you haven't given it a chance yet. Pay attention to the plan for the black pieces. Where's the pawn chain pointing? Toward the king. But be careful, because white is also going to have a very strong attack on the queen side. King's Indian games, all right? You should know that the game will be decided by an attack, either black's attack or white's attack, all right? Which of the two attacks is stronger? Black's attack. But if we don't manage the checkmate, then in the long run, thinking about an endgame, this advantage in space that white has on the queen side will end up winning for him. Therefore, you have to go for checkmate, and you have to do it quickly, and you'll see, it's going to fascinate you. The game continues as follows. Knight to e1, a very clever technique to defend against the attack that's coming on the king's side. You'll see that if your opponent leaves their knight around here, they're going to have a really hard time defending it. Don't worry, because very few people will know how to pull off these kinds of highly effective defensive maneuvers. So what's our plan next? Move this knight out of the way. Very simple. We want to push this pawn forward here. We want to use our pawns to attack the opponent's king. Do you see how they're a bit cramped for space? Let's go after them. This is a super important strategic concept you need to remember in the king's Indian defense. We don't want them to trade off this bishop. This bishop is extremely powerful because it often ends up being sacrificed on h3 to open up the position and deliver checkmate. If they trade off this bishop, we're going to be in a tough spot. So if at any point in the game you're offered a trade of light square bishops, you shouldn't accept it, okay? Super important. The game continues with bishop to e3, a fabulous maneuver by white. You can already see that Garry Kasparov's opponent with the white pieces was an extremely strong player, right? So what was the plan? Well, to play f3 and get this bishop over here, so that this bishop not only defends, but also attacks on the queen side. White's counterattack option is to try to break through on the queen side, right? You get it, right? You see how the pawn chain is also telling white where to attack? You'll always find this in your own games. The game indeed continues with f5. That's exactly what we wanted to play. There's no doubt about it. If you don't understand that you have to play 5 here, then you haven't really understood the plan of the game. 3. I just mentioned the idea, right? Not only does it support the center, but it also gives the bishop a square so it can keep defending and attacking. Very good move. Ah, look at what Kasparov does here. He keeps advancing with his pawns. The idea is clear, right? We want to go for checkmate with our pawns. We're going to push them forward to checkmate the white king. On their own, they won't do much, but once we advance a bit more, we'll bring in the knights, the queen, the bishop, and we'll try to checkmate. Many times, we really would love to trade. For example, this dark square bishop for that one. We'd really like that, because this bishop is sometimes a bit clumsy and gets stuck here, trapped by our own pawn chain. The game continues, logically, with bishop to f2, and now, well, Kasparov doesn't hesitate for even a second. He keeps up his attack. You should know that you must not waste time over here. Personally, I've won a lot of games because my opponent didn't know how to react quickly on the queen side. They kept making normal developing moves that, well, weren't useful, and then my attack came so fast that they couldn't do anything about it. This could happen to you, okay? You're gonna have to practice it. If you want more videos about the King's Indian, all you have to do is let me know in the comments, okay? If I see that a lot of people are asking me for more videos about this defense, we'll bring it back and explain more things and look at more examples so you can use it in your games because it's one of my favorites and it's very unique. Very well. So if we attack over here, white has to attack over here. Both of them are doing a fantastic job. So now what? Well, we move the knights over to the king side. Kasparov plays knight to f6. And watch out, because here they go for the typical c5 breakthrough. You see it? It's the classic breakthrough attack against Kasparov's base. Here, at some point, you can really put a lot of pressure on this spot with the knights, with this knight and the other one. Also, in some situations, you can push this pawn forward to cause a lot of trouble in black's position. So, as you can see, if white plays perfectly, they also have their own counterplay. And so, it's simply a battle to see who gets there first. But as I was saying, most opponents, especially if you're playing below 2000 or 2100 elo, definitely don't know how to react correctly. Perfect. How does Kasparov continue here after this breakthrough? Do we want to capture? In life, do we want to capture? No, because if we capture, we're helping our opponent. These two pawns would be extremely strong. And on top of that, this structure will become weaker and weaker, especially the d5 pawn, which would no longer have anyone to defend it. Therefore, no, we never want to capture here. In fact, we want them to capture us because that way they won't have the same pressure anymore. So, what do we do here? Nothing. We just stick to our plan. The knight jumps to the other side, not just to join the attack, but why else? Because at some point, our opponent might put pressure on this c7 square as well, with the rooks, with the knight, right? And a very typical defensive maneuver that you can use in your own games is this rook to f7. The rook, from the second rank, defends the whole position properly. So, well, this move also serves to clear the way for the rook, besides, of course, going to attack with the knights, right? Pawn takes pawn. Maybe this move isn't the most precise in the world, because this tension favors the white pieces. Since we can't capture, right? This is very simple. I'm going to explain what a favorable tension is so everyone can understand. You understand what a tension is, right? Two pawns that are touching each other and both can capture. Who does it favor? Well, it favors white. Why? Because black can never capture, because they'd end up in a bad position. So it's white who gets to decide whether to wait, to capture, or to advance. Once they capture, they're defining the tension, where we simply recapture with the pawn. Very important with the pawn to keep our pawn structure strong. And then our problems are over here. Rook to c2, they want to get in through 7. Kasparov's maneuver, rook to f7. You get it, right? I just explained this maneuver. And do the white pieces keep going on the queen side? Come on, don't tell me this doesn't all make perfect sense. Black is attacking on the king side, white on the queen side. Exactly as I explained to you. Bishop to f8. A very interesting move with several purposes. First of all, it's moving the bishop out of the way so it doesn't block the entry of the pieces. Also, it's defending the base of the chain, which is the most vulnerable point with the bishop and the queen. This point could be attacked quite strongly. So bishop to f8 is a multifunctional move and hard to spot. You don't really need to memorize moves, you just need to remember the ideas. And then it's true that we can study Kasparov's moves to understand these ideas and be able to apply them in our own games. But obviously, maybe there were 20 good moves in that position, right? You just need to understand the plan Kasparov was using. Here we go. All right, the game continues with a 5, a super logical move, bishop to d7. The bishop develops, taking advantage of the white squares since the pawns are on dark squares. And now this bishop can move freely along these white squares here. And above all, the bishop gets off this open file. In fact, at some point, knowing that the light squared bishop is so important for us, it might even be a good idea to sacrifice the rook for the bishop. And it wouldn't be a bad idea. Therefore, on d7, it's more than well placed. It also allows this rook to join the attack. Many times, we have so much space here on the king side behind our pawns that we can bring both rooks and the queen over to attack on the king side. The game continues with this move here, knight to b5. Would it be a good move to play bishop takes light, a normal piece exchange, right? Well, that would be a huge mistake, and I'm sure all of you understand why. We would be giving up our light squared bishop, which is our lethal weapon. So what should we do? Keep attacking. For example, what moves would be available here? Well, we could play, for example, would a 5 be possible? Yes, but even more direct would be to play g4 right away, right? Why? Because now we can really break through here. If they capture, that would be a bad idea because we're opening up all the lines and we're really going to checkmate the king. So logically, capturing is not a good option. But be careful because, as we've said, white also has their own counterplay on the queen side. They're threatening our rook. What's more important, moving this rook or going for checkmate? Well, in this case, it's much, much more important to go for checkmate. Sometimes you have to evaluate whether the position is dynamic or static. Have you ever wondered what that actually signifies? A dynamic position means that the one who moves with greater speed to win will be the one who wins. Well, that sounded pretty redundant, isn't it? The one who is quicker to checkmate their opponent, for example. In this case, the position is super dynamic. If we waste too much time, our opponent will end up taking everything, and in the end, we won't be able to checkmate. So we need to go for it. We have to go for checkmate no matter what. You should know one thing. We will always have an advantage on this flank. Always. No matter what they do, we're going to have the advantage. So, as long as they let us, let's go for it. They're attacking the least important piece in the position. The rook on a8 is the one that has the hardest time joining the attack. Look at everything we'd have to move to get it into the attack, right? And the position requires us to be dynamic, right? So here, look at what Kasparov does. And it's a really good move. He places the pawn on g3. He is attacking absolutely brilliantly right now. Just take a look at this incredibly solid pawn chain that the black pieces have carefully set up at this moment. Would it be a good idea to capture? No, it would be a very bad idea to open up lines. The most natural reaction, and the one that usually comes up, is the move h3. But the move h3 wouldn't work here either, because we could simply play g takes f2, winning this bishop, and really, even if they capture our rook afterward, it would be two pieces for a rook, and our attack would still be going strong, right? Therefore, here, white captures the rook. It's also worth mentioning that they were threatening to bring the knight in here, which is a very serious threat. Surely, at some point, we should have given up this light squared bishop, even if just for a pawn. Logically, in this case, in this position, they definitely prefer to capture the rook, since that way they'll have a big material advantage. Should we capture this bishop now? Well, maybe that wouldn't be the best idea, and I'll explain why. Do we want to have a material advantage? That's not the priority. The priority is the checkmate. And if we go this way, they capture us with the rook and everything stays well defended. So let's make slightly better moves. Let's do something much better. Bring the knight into the attack. Not just to bring in the knight, but also to clear the way for the queen. As you can see, we're threatening checkmate in one, right? So you have to be very careful here. It looks like here white is already lost because if they move the bishop, for example, over here, checkmate is inevitable. And if they push this pawn, we blow it up with the bishop, and it seems like there's no way to save this anymore. Most positions, I assure you, if you play these kinds of attacks well, can't be saved for the white pieces. That said, this player with the white pieces was so good that he found a defense. He moves the counter. With what I do? Well, with the idea that now we can't really do much. If we bring the queen over here, they defend everything. And if we capture, the bishop comes back here, and this pawn gets in our way. We can't keep attacking because it's in our way. So we simply want a pawn, but we can't keep attacking anymore. And remember, we're down a rook. So would it be a good idea now to capture this? To play the queen on the attack? Nah, that would be a bad idea. However, here Kasparov made a beautiful maneuver. Pawn takes bishop, not to win a bishop, but because now, when the rook recaptures this pawn, white has a wonderful move. The knight jumps to g3, given check. Can it be captured? No, you can't capture this knight, because then the pawn would follow, and then queen h4, which would be an inevitable checkmate. So if this knight can't be captured, the king must move. How does the game continue? Well, look, now that Kasparov has a bishop in exchange for a rook, He recaptures this knight and now has two pieces for the rook. So white no longer has extra material, they no longer have a material advantage, and our attack is still devastating. The bishop improves his position, and Kasparov realizes that there's a very vulnerable dark square diagonal here and plays this wonderful move, a6. So now the queen can come out via a7 and start taking advantage of these weak dark squares. Queen to d3, queen to a7, pinning this rook, and look at this final blow that's going to fascinate you. White pushes the pawn, and now Kasparov wins the game with a lethal combination. Pay attention because this is going to fascinate you, okay? Pawn takes pawn might seem like a totally normal move, right? Bishop takes. But now, after these exchanges, this exchange was crucial so that the pawn couldn't trap the queen. Once these exchanges are made, pay attention to this masterful move. Knight to h1, and white resigned. What a move, right? Impressive. I'm going to explain why this move is a reason to resign. If they capture the knight, we'll take the rook, threatening a lot. A lot of threats here with the knight, the rook, the bishop, and above all with the material advantage. We would have an extra piece completely clean. They couldn't do anything. They can't capture the knight. If they move away, we deliver, mate. Although they don't have to move away because it's pointless, right? Just to get out of the bin. And the rook can't move because if it does, it would simply be an illegal move. So what happens, for example, if they defend with the queen? Well then, knight takes rook, we trade everything, and we end up with the material advantage in the endgame. Also, looking ahead and connecting it to the endgame and calculation. So you should start studying all parts of the game thoroughly if you want to improve extremely quickly at chess. And of course, strategy as well, since this lesson has had a lot of strategy. As you know, you have absolutely everything in the academy. My lessons with titled masters, and also with their PGN files so you can go over the lesson. More than 60 opening courses. You pick them when you want to play, for example, the King's Indian, and study it thoroughly. You can practice all the lines, watch model games. You have middle game exercises to see who stands better, end game exercises too. You really have absolutely everything in the academy, I assure you. So my personal and most sincere recommendation is that you try training, even if it's just for a month at the academy, and you'll see that you'll notice a lot of results. I hope you really enjoyed this video. Leave me a big like if you did, and tomorrow, as always, we'll see each other in the next video, friends. Goodbye.